Do you see my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Great, great. Okay, I'll start. First of all, thank you for inviting me. I'm trying to create a lecture which contextualizes diversity of ideas present in this conference and really celebrating the role of the elders. This is an example of Mary Wilcox, who has passed away last year, and she was an extraordinary wisdom author. We look through history, different cultures, we see a beautiful representations of wisdom holders and elderly. And I'm just going to touch on some, briefly, some contemporary issues. So the lecture doesn't appear like nostalgia for some ancient times. They were difficult times too in the old day. But in contemporary culture, the elders have a particular problem, often of not being supported. I hear some other voice. I hear some other voice. Hello? I hear some other voice in the lecture. Can you close that mic? Great. Because I'm not reading, I'm in the living lecture. I can hear you all. Can you make sure it's muted? Hello?
No.
Okay. Anyway, majority of elders in the world are without support, and the countries which are lesser, and I should have not shown this one, with lesser income are trying to find the way. But the developed countries are finding the way how to avoid the pensions and such things. Anyway, these are the social issues which I want just to touch briefly upon, so it isn't idealizing the past. One of the greatest problems, of course, it's abandonment of children due to technology and to the technology. In the ancient times, the children had a significant role in rituals and were observing the mastery of not just instruments, but mastery of food and harvest and building, and were part of it. They're parts of the child development, and they don't need to be artists, but they are expressive. They are very important neurological and cognitive centers in which the movement and stylized movement, playful movement, singing even without a great singing voice, singing with the parents, or by himself, or just mumbling, and of course linguistics, which all children have equal ability to imitate any sounds to the certain age, and of course, visual arts. So the pride and the dignity of aging, it's part of a mature, wise face. Contemporary culture, this is a woman of similar age, under tremendous amount of plastic surgery, trying to make us kind of glamorous and young, and completely denying the presence of aging, the quality of aging. And I just wanted to touch upon it, not to dwell too much, because we have all seen it, experienced it, and you know, for some people, when they're young, certain surgery of face helps, but at the old age, it's denial. So another problem, just among many, it's appropriation of music and creating through neuroscience experiment this upbeat, which it's addictive, and suddenly everything has the same beat, and the hearing is completely destroyed, as well as the empathy which the music brings. This is an experiment of sound which people play in the cars, and this is what happens to a glass. Friend of the friend's child was brought for the first time to a pop concert, and this was a natural reaction to it. So we have the whole generations now of people completely separated from each other and only bonded to the consumerized technology. I have initiated, and among our friends for the COVID problems, we use the term mutual care space, not social distance, which creates some completely different culture. There is an enormous increase in depression, self-harm, and suicide among young people, and now the medical and psychological researches are showing extraordinary rise because the children are not able to cope with the reality of life. It's not as stimulating and it's more demanding. And often the depression is invisible because people are just almost 24 hours on their phones. Only when they take harm on themselves, then people begin to be aware. So I just wanted to touch upon it because instinctually, neurologically, biologically, we mirror each other, we respond. Like these two children are completely doing something primeval while their parents are shopping. And look at the bodies of the young children gravitating to the voice and the wisdom and the experience being poured by the elder. So I wanted to compare the child development and aging because there are some very significant parts. We have put them so far apart as if they belong to different cultures, different bodies, and so on and so forth. One of the many inborn instincts which all babies have is this grip, so they can hold their whole body on something. And doesn't matter what part of history, what color skin they have, what is their background. From the beginning of humanity, these biological inborn things, instincts, abilities have been brought in. Now, the speed of development of the zygote from the moment it was fertilized, it's an amazing amount of fast but very deeply intelligent and congruent and belong to every zygote and every human zygote, and then the embryo grows and very fast it becomes a child, and so on and so forth. In the old age, there is a similar decrease in faculties and abilities going back to the roots, to that fundamental, original impulse which made that unique human being. And I would touch upon it at the end. This is someone's either relative or from some village where they come from. And this old lady apparently had an incredible sense of humor and would make people laugh, but her jokes have always depths and were helpful. And this child, which was also a friend's child, has always been a very serious child. And people say, but is that a child? Well, who is this? So we cannot just simply say, oh, this is childish and this is senile. There are many grades and many things. And I'm sure the conference would address so many diverse views and understandings of aging. One of the first organs to develop, it's the ear in the embryo. At 6 months, the child has a full hearing. The hearing, the mother's voice, the heartbeat, the father's voice, and of course the songs, the traditional songs sung, the lullabies and other songs, create the sounds which go through the ear, are transformed into the neural electromagnetic signals, and that is how the brain is created, through these sound signals. So the sound plays an extraordinary part in human and our development, but just the vibration of the sound through these fibers creates this tremendous energy, biological way of creating the brain. And then the inner landscape of neurons, it's really like the trees. They are growing, they are touching, and sometimes really, again, from nothing, creating the whole systems which then hold the memory and ability to respond to the others and mirror them. And this is a neuro photograph, but it looks like a beautiful tree. So the environment repeats at different levels. The synapses of neurons, even often they are not touching, but are arcing this energy to each other, are an extraordinary ability of creatures and also of human sapient abilities to recognize and imagine this is happening, this meeting is happening 1,000,000 times a day, and imagine throughout the life. So understanding that reaching, understanding the otherness, even just from the simple cells to the human entities, it's very crucial. The fact that external and internal landscape have so much in common, we kind of denigrate it in a certain way or idealize it, and the science names everything but loses the contact to the greater realities which resemble it. So I'm just going quickly to touch upon now with this context that what we consider primitive, and this is the island of Venus, and they call it Venus to compare it to the beautiful Greek Venus, but really it's a votive figure of fertility which the ancients held in their hands and children held them in their hands. And we kind of laugh at them like, look how fat they are, but it is a symbol. And when I was a student, sincere, art history people said, look how primitive they were. They didn't know how to do the face well. Intentionally, they made it into a beehive. And the colony of bees was a tremendous model for the ancient societies. The harmony and division of labor and all of that. And the queen bee, which is the one lying down, mostly in front, the others help us all around it. She's not like some spoiled queen. She has constant birth pain throughout her life. Through tremendous courage, he holds that community. So that is celebrating in this vitality and fecundity symbols. So it's a deep sophistication of knowing the natural processes and also the suffering which they bring. Similar hand-size sleeping goddess is a central figure of the hypogeum in Malta, which is one of the oldest temples, and lots of ancient and still some indigenous cultures celebrate the earth. The burying people was to return them to the mother earth. And this hypogeum was made in a shape of a womb. It's on 3 floors and it's carved out of living rock. And this is part of the main sanctuary, but next to it, this is the entrance to it, it's all contained. Next to it is this chamber, which has just a small alcove in the wall, where a baritone or bass voice sings mostly a vowels, occasional consonant, and the entire 3-4-floor temple vibrates in a positive sound which rejuvenates. So understanding womb-like energy of sound recreated by ancient people, in which in the goddess temple the man's voice fertilizes this vibration which is nurturing. And on the ceiling, it's like a notation which clearly resembles, of different sizes and spaced, clearly resembles the knowledge of the spiral of the inner ear. So again, our superiority of being so evolved, it's really not understanding the depths and the humanity and the biology of ancient rituals. The wisdom holders of many, many cultures were usually, this is from Dogon culture, which is kept the tradition with the old African religions, incredibly sophisticated. These people have amazing astronomical knowledge. These are the other 2 of the same culture. And they really hold the community. Different families have a tradition of watching one part of the sky, and these elders combine all the perceptions. So their festival celebrates the tiny little invisible planet, which is only visible by different light around Sirius, which is their main ritual, which happens every 65 years. So the knowledge of that and waiting for it, it's very important. There was tremendous amount of women wisdom holders and certain music and dance which they helped each other. This is one of them, very unassuming, and in the Turkic Altaic cultures throughout Central Asia, and the wisdom holder is the woman in the back. in a white scarf. That is the only signal, and people know her. She's part of the community. She's very quiet there while the people are doing the ritual. And this has survived through many cultures. And it's not against the cultures. It was integrated into Islam and also through the Soviet, they carried this. So the women wisdom holders and men wisdom holders in their own, and also even just in esnafs and in zanat work, there is a tremendous training of the ethics of the craft, but particularly for the wisdom holders. So they are not identified, they are not inflamed, they are just really helping. Here is the tarantella, a pizzika, which is a dance where women help women, very similar, almost identical to Egyptian Zar. And woman with the drum is the wisdom holder. She is, you can just see her commitment and seriousness. Here is the Tsar, a leader and leader in a sense, like a therapist, but she's not charging. She might get some food donations, but she is carefully watching the woman in need who is going through the process. She is not going into any kind of trance. The popular culture talks about shamans and this, and they're all in trance. Well, in this particular instance, they are watching. And there is a tremendous amount of history about it. This is from the Pompeii, and in Dionysian mysteries, which really continue some of the ancient Egyptian and African things, you can see the woman wisdom holder carefully watching the woman who is coming through a process of transpersonal and back to her daily conditions. So the ways of withdrawing, ways of being both with the family and having a space to depart has been tremendously respected in many, many cultures. Here again is a Dogon image in which one of the elders is gone and it's leaving. He is not anymore an outer practitioner within a community, but people come and consult him. But eventually he withdraws. And in the hunter-gatherer times, the old peoples were just simply, with great care and respect, left in the nature because they would slow down the survival process. And in some cultures, the elders just quietly walk away. And in some cultures, there are specific places where the elders go and stop eating, stop drinking for their last few days, hours, or whatever it is. But it is known, respected, and the family is aware they're not abandoned. And of course, returning to the earth, all kinds of burials are the part of also celebrating life, celebrating continuity. So I just quickly show you, and it's really a partially respect to all the papers which might not mention anything like this in particular, but somewhere, to give them a universality. This is Japanese ritual in which the water is put on the lips of a dying or just dead person. So different elements are used, but some elements are always there. In the Japanese culture, they were burned, but around is, while they are leaving, it's a table of some offerings. And that is in all cultures, different offerings. People, this is the Japanese way of saying goodbye and announcing the departure of somebody. There were certain collective gestures and prayers. This is Orthodox, Christian Orthodox celebration cake, which is performed and shared after the funeral. And it's a very specific ritual in which only for dying were the presence, the energy, and the continuity of whatever is the God image in that culture is celebrating in kind of rhythmic, repetitious way of these three qualities. The Native Americans sometimes buried, in a sense, before putting them in the ground, put the corpses into canoes or on the kind of improvised platforms before they buried them underground. And often in native cultures, they are buried just under the floor, particularly in some of the American Indians. They actually lived underground in the earth, and their temple, kivas, were always under the earth, and they would bury the dead right there. So they were always with them. So in Inuit culture, which, some of them are permafrost, some of them have a short season, but the ones who have access to stone, and these graves have been revealed at those short times, have a tremendous meaning, both collectively and personally. And of course, the most well-known is the weighing of the heart of the ancient Egyptians. Ma'at's feather, you see there on the right, is light feather, is measured against the heart of the departed person. And they have a long list of 40 plus sayings. I didn't lie, I didn't do this, I didn't do that, which throughout a life people kind of practice. They know that this will be tested in their last moment. So some kind of living ethics with the departure play a great part. In Egyptian, you can know which date it is by what headdress they have. And this is the Ma'at with her feather. This is extremely interesting and, in my view, important. This is a burial, a reconstructed burial. The bones are on the right, of the Neanderthal culture. We have created the idea that they are subhuman, they have nothing to do with us, we are the evolved part. But more and more people realize they're just us. They had music, they had painting and tools. They buried their dead with some of the tools, and they contracted the corpse into a fetal position. So this return of the biological energy was understood by the Neanderthals, not by the contemporary evolved humans. So to close, and I called the paper finale because the musical compositions, both, in the classical repertoire or in the classical music of India and other places, but also in indigenous and folkloric music, the ending of the songs, it's of a great neurological importance. It's catharsis, it's cleaning, it's concluding, it's training us towards that moment. And beautiful plays, were sometimes tragic, have that quality. So in gypsy funeral, just what they use like water in the Japanese, in the gypsy funeral, the moment the person dies until they bury them, they are vigilant and have a fire going. Even if they are traveling, they stop and they are burning the fire until they bury the person. But in some cultures, they have people who know how to wail, but also, and this is important too, the wailers, but also this is a gypsy wisdom holder who knows how to hold the silence, how to hold the people in the present. You can see the smoke of the fire just behind her, to hold that together. This, in my last few slides, it's a contemporary wisdom holder who lived modestly after she retired as a librarian, but who helped in London, particularly young women. And here she is welcoming a newborn girl, baby girl, into the world. And at the end of her time, she lived probably up to 90 or so, or similar age. She kind of quietly withdrew, just with few people who were helping her, but giving this example of a departure. And the human face has the story written on it, even the young face. But the story is also written in every molecule, in every memory. And by retreating, although the faculties are less and less, but neuroscience has discovered that actually the wisdom part are growing. So the ability to essentialize, to hold one's life towards the very last moment. And some people who have survived, almost died, tell them in fraction of seconds, life is summarized. And so this is like the zygote coming in and developing at a tremendous speed. Here, almost at an atomic speed, something is summarized into the essence of that person, of that destiny, of that story, and often is accompanied by this last gasp. Sometimes that gasp lasts for an hour. It's a strange sound, unique sound, which evokes both the training of the near and dear towards that essentializing. It carries the essentializing. It evokes tremendous forgivingness and empathy for the dying. And eventually, the person departs. That is my lecture.
Thank you very much, Professor, for this inspiring speech. I think it generated a couple of questions in the audience, and it made us recall some of the forgotten procedures and attitudes towards closing years, the elderly years, and the roles of elders. The floor is open for questions. Can you hear us, Professor?
Yeah, no, I can hear you. So,
okay. Yes, please. There is a question, Slobodan.
I can't hear it, but
it's just starting.
Okay.
Thank you very much once again, dear Professor, for your precious book. Actually, my question is about that part about the woman wisdom in the ancient history. They were renowned for curing, healing, spreading positive energy and love, if I'm correct, on both individual level and social level. But coming back to our contemporary understanding of aging, I think especially in the Western cultures, aging is generally associated with loss of freshness, if I'm correct. And also, youth is more valorized than being an elderly. So I wonder your opinions about this sharp contrasts, and I also wonder if we, in our current society, really need these contrasts, these contrasting. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your question. It is really the heart of the matter, and I think few papers would also address it. My response to the conference and with this lecture was for us to begin to introduce this quality of particularly women wisdom holders, but also any wisdom holders, to introduce it. It's not in the curriculum. You know, we are still under the Hegelian thing of moral superiority of the West. Hello. And, you know, we need to do something. And I think this conference is doing that. But one cannot be aggressive about it. It has to be through role models. It has to be through understanding. You know, just like that slide of the old storyteller giving something from experience. So if we, because most of us are teachers, if we carry that, that would reflect. We don't have to call it wisdom. If one responds to the student and say somebody who is dyslexic, but it's brilliant, and if we just dismiss them, but if we respond, find a way to work with them and so on and so forth, it's part of our profession to care. So we can bring that in a discreet, minimal way. And of course, the whole valuing of outer success and not valuing the substance, we cannot help it. But if we model it and live it, and clearly you are aware of it, and somewhere you want to, and I wish I have some answer bigger than this, but we are doing it. Your question and me trying and us all trying. We are doing it, and that's the best we can do.
Thank you, Professor. Any other questions? Yes.
Thank you. Professor, for this beautiful lecture. Thank you for this beautiful lecture. I wanted to ask, and we talked a lot throughout this lecture, music. Music is so important in our evolution, in our ancient history. I wanted to ask, and particularly the ear generating in this first 6 months as a baby, in a fetus. Did evolution make us go this way, or did music make this evolution?
Well, it's again, if we are aware of it, and if some people put loud music when they're pregnant on earphones on their pregnant belly. You know, if we really know that it is the mother's voice, the father's voice, the people around, which creates this depths of human being, if we know that, if we allow children to hear different folk songs from different countries, we point their quality and what are they saying, then again, if it is part of the education, the recognition of that will be there. But again, we do that in our performances, and they're very small, and they're only acoustic, and one of our performance, Tolga Aiklar, was trained in Siberia. He does throat singing, he plays Maringhur. So these sounds are given to the contemporary audiences, and of course they respond. But they don't have to be as dramatic as throat singing. A simple lullaby sung by someone who is not a great singer, but just the lullaby's own rhythm, tonality, words, and how it ends would create something. It does all. So I hope this answered what you asked. I have slight difficulty to hear every word, but I hear 90%. So is it?
It's very well received. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, any other questions? I guess not. There's no questions, Professor. Thank you for joining us on this online session. It was having you. It was very nice having you here in Izmir, even if it is online. And thank you for your contributions to cultural studies symposiums along the years. And we hope to see you soon in the next one, maybe face to face.
Let's hope. But thank you for inviting me. And
Okay.
goodbye. Goodbye.
Okay, this is the end of the session. Thank you very much for joining us for this inspiring talk. See you at the coffee break. Thanks, Slobodan. That was inspiring. Şimdi